Awaken your shadow. The truth sets some people free. It offends everyone else. By Seth, the Red Neo, Cherupak.
Chapter 7. Your Divine Right to Sovereignty. I decided long ago never to walk in anyone's shadows. If I fail, if I succeed, at least I'll live as I believe. No matter what they take from me, they can't take away my dignity. The Greatest Love of All, written by Michael Masser and Linda Diane Creed, performed by Whitney Houston. He who controls others may be powerful, but he who has mastered himself is mightier still. Lao Tzu, Tao Te Ching, Book 33. A king may move a man, but it is the man who chooses to move. William Monahan, Kingdom of Heaven, spoken by King Baldwin IV. Self-rule is the first empire. E. R. Dodds. Part 1. Foundations of the Sovereign Self.
Your sovereign self is your ruler. It's the part of you that sits at the center of your own kingdom, rooted, discerning, and unshakably self-authored. It is the axis of authority within your mind-body complex, the throne upon which your will sits, the fire that declares, I am the authority of my own life, where the secure self grounds you in safety and the adventurous self drives you into the unknown. The sovereign self is the chooser. It governs the flow of your energy, your attention, your allegiance. It determines what is law within the borders of your being. Without it, your other selves drift, safe but stagnant, daring but reckless. With it, every self aligns under a single banner: authorship. This self lives in your solar plexus, the fiery core just above the navel. Ancient mystics called this the seat of will. The third chakra, Manipura, meaning city of jewels. Here lives the jewel of self-mastery, shining with clarity and decisiveness. In your nervous system, this is the energetic center that translates impulse into action. It is where your gut clenches when a boundary is crossed, where your fire rises when a decision must be made. It is the felt sense of sovereignty, not as an idea, but as a visceral command pulsing through your body. Yet this self has been exiled from modern culture. The takers who built the matrix despise the sovereign self. They want cooperative and productive subjects. This is why from childhood we are trained to obey and respect authority. This includes parents who reject a child asking why, teachers who grade obedience, bosses who measure hours instead of outcomes, and governments who promise safety at the cost of our liberty. We are shamed for saying no, guilted for drawing boundaries, and labeled as irresponsible for daring to rule our own time. We are told that self-rule is selfish, when in truth it is the only foundation of integrity. The passive self is what emerges when the sovereign abdicates. It waits for orders, avoids conflict, and hides behind excuses. It says, I didn't have a choice, forgetting that the power to choose is the one gift that can never be taken, only surrendered. The passive self bargains away sovereignty for acceptance, for comfort, for the illusion of peace, but peace without sovereignty is slavery. Comfort without authorship is captivity. To awaken your sovereign self is to reclaim what was never truly lost, the throne of decision. It is to remember that you are the ruler of your inner kingdom, and that no law is higher than the decree you choose to live by. Others may influence, persuade, or oppose you, but you alone are the leading authority of your mind, body, and destiny. Only you can choose between kneeling in submission or standing in sovereignty. True sovereignty has always been feared by empires, not because a sovereign must overthrow thrones or armies, but because one person who governs themselves cannot be ruled by deception. A person aligned with their sovereign self may live in a land governed by laws, taxes, or hierarchies, but they remain internally ungoverned. They cannot be bribed by false promises, shamed into compliance, or seduced by hollow authority. They know when to play the game and when to stand their ground. Their allegiance belongs to truth alone. This is why the ancients placed so much emphasis on will. In the Bhagavad Gita 3:35, Krishna tells Arjuna, "It is better to live your own destiny imperfectly than to live an imitation of somebody else's life with perfection." Here is the sovereign self, declaring that self-rule, even if clumsy or costly, is nobler than surrendering your dharma to another's script. Sovereignty is not about flawless execution, it is about alignment with your unique design, even when the world insists you play a borrowed role. Jesus captured the same principle when he said, "Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Anything more comes from evil." Matthew 5:37. Sovereignty is clarity. It is the authority to declare yes and no without needing apology or manipulation. The passive self wavers, hedges, and hides. The sovereign self speaks with a clean spine, a clear voice, and an embodied presence that says, "I am the ruler of my own kingdom, whether small or large. I am the ruling authority." The Tao Te Ching 33 echoes this truth. Knowing others is intelligence. Knowing yourself is true wisdom. Mastering others is strength. Mastering yourself is true power. The world confuses sovereignty with domination, the tyrant lording over others. But the Tao reminds us the highest mastery is inward. Domination is a counterfeit sovereignty. It feeds on fear, it crumbles when opposed, and it always seeks new conquests to distract from its inner emptiness. Sovereignty, by contrast, is satisfied with self-mastery. It needs no subjects, for its kingdom is already whole. Throughout myth and scripture, the true sovereign is not the conqueror, but the one who rules themselves. Consider Jesus before Pilate, a bound man, accused and condemned, yet radiating a calm authority that shook the Roman governor to his core. Pilate held the armies. Jesus held his sovereignty. One ruled by decree, the other by presence. History remembers which authority endured. This is the paradox of the sovereign self. It does not need to prove itself with force. It does not seek followers, titles, or recognition. Its authority is felt, not demanded. When embodied, the presence of this self changes rooms without words. It inspires and influences simply by being unmoved, unbought, and unbroken. This is why tyrants fear it, because they cannot buy what is not for sale. Sovereignty is the power to declare authorship over your life, to say, "This time is mine, this body is mine, this choice is mine, and I will live with the consequences of my choices." It is not freedom from consequence, or it is freedom to choose which consequences you will bear. That is the essence of true power. Sovereignty is more than an intellectual concept. It is an embodied signal. You feel it when your spine straightens, when your voice deepens with clarity, when your gut says enough, and you refuse to betray yourself. It radiates from the solar plexus like a steady flame. When this fire is balanced, it manifests as presence, the calm, grounded confidence of someone who knows their own authority. When your sovereign self is repressed, you collapse into passivity, waiting for others to decide your fate. When it is distorted, you grasp for control, mistaking domination for power. This is why sovereignty is as much somatic as it is spiritual. The nervous system tells the truth about whether you are sovereign. When you feel anchored in your own authority, your breath slows, your posture straightens, and your voice deepens. Your body becomes coherent, aligned with your decisions. When you lack sovereignty, these patterns collapse into hesitation, bracing, and indecision. The nervous system doesn't lie. It mirrors whether you are ruled from within or without. A braced body, a shrinking posture, a hesitant voice. These are the giveaways of a kingdom without a ruler. A steady gaze, an anchored breath, a clear no or yes. These are the signs of a sovereign enthroned. The difference is not charisma, it is coherence. It is the internal alignment between will, word, and action. Modern culture has trained us to abandon this fire. We are taught to comply in classrooms, to submit to workplace rules, to go along to get along in families and faiths. We are told that saying yes keeps the peace, when in truth it kills the self. Every time you silence your gut, every time you outsource your choice, you abdicate the throne of your own being. You hand over your crown to systems, institutions, or people who were never meant to rule you. People who live this way become part of the staggering number of people who die with this regret embedded in their heart. I wish I'd lived a life true to myself, not what others expected of me. Many times this regret masks itself beneath rationalizations until it becomes undeniable at the close of a person's life. Until then, life feels hollow, and our other six selves collapse into distortion in an attempt to make up for the missing sovereignty in your life. We self-medicate through consumerism, sexual addictions, and people-pleasing. We numb ourselves through codependent relationships, speaking in cliches instead of speaking our raw truth, following social and cultural norms instead of trusting our intuition, and isolating ourselves from our divine nature in a vain attempt to feel significant. Codependent relationships, speaking in cliches instead of speaking our raw truth, following social and cultural norms instead of trusting our own intuition, and isolating ourselves from our divine nature in a vain attempt to make ourselves feel significant. Without sovereignty, security becomes codependence. Adventure becomes recklessness. Love becomes manipulation. Influence becomes corruption. Wisdom becomes dogma. Transcendence becomes escapism. The sovereign self is the axis on which all other selves turn. Without it, your inner kingdom fragments into chaos. With it, your kingdom aligns in harmony, each self serving its function under the law of authorship. The ancients knew this. They crowned their kings and queens not only to govern the land, but also to symbolize the divine order of self-rule. The true sovereign was expected to be a servant of the higher law, to embody justice not only for their subjects, but for themselves. When rulers abandoned self-mastery, kingdoms fell. The same is true within. If you would rule your life, you must first rule yourself. This is why the sovereign self is not optional. It is not an advanced luxury of the enlightened. It is the foundation of freedom, the prerequisite of purpose. To awaken it is to reclaim your throne, to rise from the ashes of passivity and decree. My time is sacred. My choices are my own. I will live my life as the author, not as a character in someone else's story. The world does not need more followers. It does not need more rebels. It needs sovereigns, men and women who do not wait for permission, who do not demand control, but who embody authorship from the inside out. This is your divine right to sit on the throne of your own life, to rule not with tyranny, but with truth. New subheader: the sovereign self in relationships. Your relationships reveal whether your sovereign self is awake or exiled. Relationships are the crucible where sovereignty is tested, not in the silence of solitude, but in the messy tension of friendship, intimacy, and love. Anyone can feel and live as a sovereign on a mountaintop. The question is whether you can hold your throne at the dinner table, in conflict, in bed, or when someone you love asks you to betray yourself for their comfort. When the sovereign self is active and integrated, it empowers you to bond without losing yourself. It creates a dynamic where connection does not require collapse and where love does not demand self-abandonment. In this space, each person remains intact, meeting as equals, not as dependents or rulers. This is not detachment, it's devotion without distortion. In relationships, the sovereign self says, I am fully here and I am fully myself. This truth is ancient. In Genesis 2:18, when God creates a partner for Adam, the Hebrew phrase used is ezer kenegdo. While often translated as helper or helpmeet, the word ezer is used elsewhere in the Old Testament to describe God as a source of strength and deliverance. The full phrase means a helper who stands opposite, a counterpart who is both equal and distinct. In ancient Hebrew culture, the word opposite, kenegdo, didn't imply opposition or conflict, but completion through contrast. To stand opposite was to face as a mirror, as one who reveals, balances, and activates the other. This pattern of polarities defining wholeness appears repeatedly in Proverbs, where truths are clarified through direct contrasts. A wise son brings joy to his father, but a foolish son brings grief to his mother. Proverbs 10:1. Or hatred stirs up conflict, but love covers all wrongs. Proverbs 10:12. These apophatic pairings illuminate meaning through polarity, revealing essence by what it is not as much as by what it is. This directly parallels the principle of gender explored in Chapter 6, the interplay of masculine and feminine energies as dynamic complements, not static roles. Masculine and feminine are not about biology or social norms, but about reciprocal forces that generate wholeness. In this light, ezer kenegdo is not a subordinate role, but a sovereign dance of equals, a sacred polarity where each self is fully expressed and fully received. This isn't about hierarchy, it's about partnership built on mutuality, sovereignty, and shared power. There's a cliché in the self-help world that we shouldn't need a partner. Short-sighted content creators and even mental health professionals push this myth to the point of superstitious paranoia, forbidding single people to use the words "I need" when talking about their desire for intimacy and love. They carelessly reject the idea that our partner should complete us. They claim that using such words will cause the universe to delay the manifestation of our life partner. They label our need for this divine completion as codependent. They advise single people to become whole themselves before even looking for love. If these false prophets understood the deeper concept encoded in Genesis 2:18, they would know that they're promoting a doctrine of devils. Our need for connection is as natural and vital as our need for breath, for food, for water. To need someone is not weakness, it is recognition of our divine design. Our ezer kenegdo is to complete us in the same way that they have since the very beginning, when God created us to unite with our partner as one flesh. Those who deny this divine union are foolish at best, and agents of Satan at worst, whether they realize it or not. Teaching people that they should not need each other when the very need is wired into our biology is a cruel and ignorant myth that isolates the human heart from its sacred longing to be seen, met, and fulfilled in covenantal love. Sovereignty does not negate the need for connection. It dignifies it, protects it, and empowers us to enjoy it without losing ourselves in the process. This union of polarities is the ultimate manifestation of the principle of gender explored in Chapter 6. It's the interplay of masculine and feminine energies as dynamic complements, not static roles. Masculine and feminine transcend biological labels and social norms. They are reciprocal forces that generate wholeness. In this light, Ezer Kenegdo is not a subordinate role but a sovereign dance of equals, a sacred polarity where each self is fully expressed and fully received. It's a partnership built on mutuality, sovereignty, and shared power. The sovereign self honors connection, not in spite of autonomy, but because of it. In romance, this means being able to say, I want to share my life with you, without saying, I will betray myself to keep you. In friendship, it means staying loyal without self-sacrifice. In family, it means honoring your lineage without being bound by its limitations. It offers the powerful stance, I love you, but I will not abandon myself to do so. This is where the movement from dependence to independence to interdependence becomes essential to healthy connection. Dependence says, I can't regulate myself without you. Independence says, I do not need you at all. Interdependence says, I can connect with you while being true to myself. The sovereign self makes interdependence possible. It ensures that two people meet as whole beings, not as fragments trying to feed off of each other like symbiotic parasites. Without sovereignty, relationships collapse into dependency or power struggles. With sovereignty, they evolve into partnerships of freedom. When the sovereign self is present, conflict becomes clarifying rather than chaotic. You don't need to prove your worth, control the outcome, or suppress your needs. You can speak your truth clearly and cleanly because you're not performing for love, you're standing in it. The sovereign self allows you to say, this is important to me whether you agree or not. I'm not abandoning myself so that I can stay with you. Let's take the focus off ourselves and think about what our relationship needs. This is sovereignty in motion, not as rigidity, but as integrity. In this space, union becomes possible, not through fusion or domination, but through the sacred dance of two whole beings choosing each other freely. This is the heart of sovereign intimacy. As Henry Cloud put it, being with you without losing me. When two sovereign selves meet, they don't erase themselves to connect, nor do they guard themselves in isolation. Each person remains true to their values, voice, and boundaries. In doing so, they create a space of deep trust and freedom. This trust isn't built by pretending not to need each other. It's built by honoring the very real, very sacred truth that we do. Need is not the enemy of sovereignty. It is its context. Sovereignty dignifies our need for one another by allowing us to meet it with intention, clarity, and choice. Despite what the rubber chicken self-help proponents say, the idea that a partner might complete you speaks to a truth far older than pop culture cliches. Completion is not about deficiency, it's about divine design. Just as day completes night and the inhale completes the exhale, we are meant to meet in the places where our differences create something greater than either of us alone. This isn't romantic fluff. It is the metaphysical blueprint for union, but today a dangerous lie is spreading in the name of self-help, that needing another person is weakness, that to long for union is codependency, that to desire completion is some form of emotional brokenness. This is not healing, it is heresy. And make no mistake, it is not just foolishness, it is a doctrine of devils. Paul warned us in 1 Timothy 4:1, Now the Spirit speaketh expressly, that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. Modern self-help cliches, despite being wrapped in the language of empowerment and radical independence, drive us deeper into the hell of isolation from authentic connection. They are direct invitations for demonic dominion and possession, seducing the soul away from covenant, from connection, from the sacred hunger to be known and completed by another. Love without need is not sovereignty, it is severance. To reject your God-given longing for communion is not strength, it is spiritual self-mutilation. We were created to need each other. We were designed for union, not as addicts seeking a fix, but as sovereign souls seeking the sacred spark that only awakens in relationship. The sovereign self doesn't pretend to be whole in isolation. It acknowledges that its wholeness includes its need for connection, and it chooses communion, not as compromise, but as completion. In parenting, the sovereign self models respectful leadership, clear, grounded, and emotionally honest. "I love you, but the answer is no" becomes a full sentence, one that teaches children how to honor their own authority while respecting yours. It doesn't dominate or collapse, it leads from the center. Ralph Waldo Emerson described this spiritual approach to parenting beautifully in his essay, The Oversoul, when he wrote, "In my dealing with my child, my Latin and Greek, my accomplishments and my money stead me nothing, but as much soul as I have avails. If I am willful, he sets his will against mine, one for one, and leaves me, if I please, the degradation of beating him by my superiority of strength. But if I renounce my will and act for the soul, setting that up as umpire between us two, out of his young eyes looks the same soul he reveres and loves with me." This it that Emerson refers to is not the individual soul, but the universal living mind, the very presence he calls the Oversoul. It is what Jesus called the Father, what the Hebrews called YHWH, what the Taoists call the Tao, what the Greeks called the Logos, what the Hermeticists called the All, and what Max Planck described as a conscious and intelligent mind, the matrix of all matter. This is not a poetic flourish, it is the infinite, eternal intelligence behind all reality, the unifying source that breathes life into each self. Emerson is showing us that no amount of education, status, or strength gives him authority over his child. But when he steps out of ego and aligns with the Oversoul as the shared divine center between them, something miraculous happens. The same divine intelligence that lives through him lives through the child, and both recognize it in each other. This is the sacred resonance that occurs when sovereignty meets sovereignty through the living intelligence of the All. When a parent speaks from this place, the child responds from the same center, not because they are overpowered, but because they are seen. This is the spiritual architecture of sovereign leadership, not coercion, not appeasement, but the call and response of two divine intelligences recognizing one another across different forms. Emerson's story is not just a poetic anecdote, it's a living diagram of divine governance. The presence of the Oversoul evokes reverence, not through fear, but through truth. Soul meets soul, and the illusion of hierarchy dissolves in the presence of true order. He continues, "The action of the soul is oftener in that which is felt and left unsaid than in that which is said in any conversation. It broods over every society, and they unconsciously seek for it in each other. We know better than we do. We do not yet possess ourselves, and we know at the same time that we are much more. I feel the same truth how often in my trivial conversation with my neighbors that somewhat higher in each of us overlooks this byplay, and Jove nods to Jove from behind each of us." These are not just poetic reflections, they're spiritual blueprints. Emerson reveals that when we release our attachment to control and act from the deeper self, we encounter that same self mirrored back in the other, even in a child. The soul does not recognize rank, it recognizes resonance. Sovereign leadership evokes sovereign response. Whether with a child, a friend, or a partner, this is the sacred moment where the sovereign self in one recognizes the sovereign self in another. To raise a child in sovereignty is to invite them into the shared art of self-governance. It is to model a life that says, "I trust you to grow into your own wisdom, and I will not interfere with your dignity to expedite your obedience." Parenting, at its best, becomes a stewardship of sovereign souls, not a project in control. Scripture reflects this wisdom. Galatians 5:1 says, "It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. This tells us that love must be chosen in freedom, or it is not love at all. Likewise, the Tao Te Ching, Book 17, tells us, when the master governs, the people are hardly aware that he exists. This is the energy of the sovereign self. It governs by being, not by forcing. It allows others to flourish without needing to control them. This authority doesn't need to be imposed on others. They already feel its coherence in how the true leader stands, moves, speaks, and acts. In relationship conflict, sovereignty looks like steadiness, not the need to win nor the urge to disappear. The passive self collapses. The domineering self attacks, but the sovereign self remains. It listens, speaks, and chooses with presence. Not everyone will agree with your truth, but they will respect the one who speaks it with coherence. Sovereign love takes root in the shared unions of marriage, family, and friendship. It is the joining of multiple voices into one signal, a signal that's clearer and louder because of the power forged by the voluntary union of sovereign voices. We'll explore this more in Chapter 8. For now, know that truly healthy love and connection say, I will not rule you, I will not be ruled by you, I will rule myself, and in that freedom, I choose you. Sovereignty is essential for real intimacy. It makes union possible, not fusion, not control, but conscious, embodied partnership. It allows love to evolve from dependency into devotion. When you rule yourself, you are finally free to choose another, not out of fear or fragmentation, but from the fullness of your being. New subheader, the sovereign self and the principle of causation. The principle of causation tells us that there are no causes on the material plane. The material world is but the gradual unfolding of effects set in motion by causes on the spiritual plane. I will unpack and support this idea in a moment. First, let me say that this misunderstanding about the nature of causation is the root of all our frustrated hopes, goals, and expectations. Not some of them, all of them. We connect present effects with prior effects and assume that the preceding effect is the cause. We believe that turning a doorknob and pushing the door caused it to open. We think a harsh word sparked a fight. We assume that driving a car to a destination caused our arrival. We set goals and we plan to set causes in motion that will make it happen. Sometimes we get lucky and achieve the goal. Other times we unknowingly align ourselves with the principle of causation by acting on the true plane of cause, which I'll reveal in a moment, and we get the expected outcome. But most of the time we're completely perplexed when something unexpected blocks us from achieving the goal, or we just can't discipline ourselves to keep working until it happens, or to sustain the result after we've achieved the goal. The truth is, we failed, gave up, or backslid because we weren't actually setting causes in motion. We were mistaking effects for causes and diverting our attention away from the true plane of causes. We're observing or participating in effects as they unfold in non-linear time and assuming the prior effects to be the causes. The material world as we experience it is a mere reflection of our actions in the unseen realm. Like shadows on the cave wall, or like watching a movie on a screen instead of stepping into real life, they echo something more primary, more potent, more real. In quantum mechanics, this is confirmed in the collapse of the wave function. Particles do not settle into a single measurable state until observed. Reality then is not shaped by deterministic linear cause and effect, but by the entanglement of observation, intention, and energy. The observer is not separate from the observed. They participate in creation. Think of how people behave differently when they know they are being watched. A child tidying up when a parent enters the room, or an employee working harder when the boss walks by. Observation itself changes the outcome. This everyday truth mirrors Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which states that particles express themselves differently based on whether they're being measured. This principle doesn't just reveal a limitation of measurement, it reveals the pliability of the very fabric of what we call reality. There are no causes on the material plane, only effects. All causes take place in the spiritual realm, the realm of the unmeasurable. I'll explain what I mean by the spiritual realm and the science supporting it in a moment. First, let's examine the ancient texts that echo this truth. The Hermetic texts tell us that the all is mind, and that the universe itself is mental, a construct of consciousness, which we call spirit. The Tao Te Ching tells us that the Tao, the source of all being, is formless and eternal, birthing form through the dance of polarity. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna reminds Arjuna that action without attachment is divine, that the results of any deed belong not to the doer, but to the unfolding of Dharma. In Christian mysticism, the Logos is the first cause, not flesh. In Genesis, God speaks, vibration, frequency, word, and only then does matter come into form. All these texts tell us that true causation happens not in the material world, but on the higher plane of thought. The quantum field, the realm of infinite possibility, embodies the unmanifest will of the divine, encoded with every potential. Belief, emotion, and intention are levers of creation. When coherent, they align and reshape the field. When incoherent, they scatter into chaos. To mistake material effects for causes is to confuse the painting for the painter. A clearer way to see this is through belief shaping outcome. A person convinced they will fail an exam often performs poorly, not because of destiny, but because belief shaped focus, energy, and recall. Another person who believes deeply in their recovery from illness often heals faster, supported by the body's alignment with conviction. These everyday examples reveal that unseen beliefs drive visible outcomes. Sovereignty starts with waking up from the illusion of material causes. It means aligning not with effects, but with the laws that govern them. Vibration, polarity, correspondence, rhythm, mentalism, gender, and causation. Every thought, word, and emotion becomes a seed. The rest is harvest. The past is memory. The future is potential. The present is the only place where true causation can be wielded. To live anywhere else is to abdicate the throne of sovereignty. Now is the only time that truly exists. The past holds memory. The future holds potential. Both are tools, not territories. They serve a purpose. The past helps us learn. The future helps us aim. But when clung to, they become what Mark Passio calls boxes for consciousness, mental prisons that trap us in regret over the past or fantasy about the future. Sovereignty cannot exist in either. Once the wound is healed and the intention is set, the mind must return to the only place where power lives, the present. This moment is the only throne you can sit on. Fiat currencies, dollars, pesos, yen, etc., and clock time are two of the most potent boxes for consciousness created by the authors of the Matrix. Time is a tool humans built to coordinate life across distance. Bells that start shifts, timetables that run trains, zones that sync cities. It is useful technology, not a law of nature. Used wisely, it helps us meet at 10 o'clock, catch a flight, or schedule a surgery. But it was never meant to define your worth or dictate your rhythm. Because millions of us orient to the same clocks, a collective habit forms. Factory whistles, school bells, and now smartphone notifications train our nervous systems to move on command. We speed up at the ping, feel late even when nothing essential is due, and equate urgency with importance. In that atmosphere, the clock becomes more than a device. It becomes a collective belief, a non-physical template of consciousness that shapes perception and behavior. Consider the 4-minute mile. For decades, it was treated as a hard limit. Everyone believed that human beings were biologically incapable of breaking it. In 1954, Roger Bannister broke it, and within months other runners did too. Physics didn't change. The boundary in belief did. That is how shared paradigms open or close possibility. This is how mental constructs produce visible outcomes by creating a template of belief in the spiritual realm. The ancients called these templates demons, and to believe in them and obey them is the true definition of demonic possession. When you internalize minutes equal value, you design days around alerts and deadlines and harvest anxiety, shallow focus, and fatigue. If you orient to completion and purpose, you will design days around meaningful finishes and harvest depth, presence, and satisfaction. Paradigms are powerful not because they are divine law, but because we consent to live under them. The remedy is not to smash the clocks, but to reclaim authorship. Let time serve purpose, not replace it. Belief must be active, not passive. When the heart believes, it does not merely imagine, it creates. Coherent belief produces alignment and vitality. Fragmented belief breeds distortion and draws matching chaos. Fear-based beliefs are not punishment, but invitations to reintegrate and return to coherence. When belief aligns with design, time becomes spacious again, and sovereignty returns. This reality reveals itself in the architecture of energy fields and chakras. The sacral fire, orange and fierce, is often mistaken for the source of power. Many burn themselves alive on its altar, confusing intensity with sovereignty. But that blaze is only fuel. True authority arises when fire yields to air, when the sacral joins with the heart, throat, and third eye. The voice carries presence, not just sound. Then decisions breathe instead of burn. Then power inspires rather than consumes. This is the evolution from compulsion to coherence. All weakness simply marks what has not yet been embodied. All lack points to the energy unclaimed. The modern world seduces both men and women into forgetting this. Sovereignty never demands the burden of doing and being more than what our physical energy supply can keep up with. It demands only the mastery of the authentic self and alignment with divine law. When this happens, all things in the material world manifest as slow effects. This includes the actions and events we commonly mistake for causes. Spirit is always the true cause. This is why the sovereign self doesn't obey mechanical laws but aligns itself with divine possibility. The past and the future are mere templates, unfolding as the collective result of activity in the spiritual realm. The present is the throne. From this throne, the decrees of spirit ripple across timelines. What appear to be pivotal decisions on the material plane, launching a business, forgiving a betrayal, ending an addiction, manifest as echoes of choices already made in the invisible. The hand moves because belief already authored the motion. Words form because coherence has already aligned the field. The kiss, the contract, the courageous act, these expressions follow patterns already vibrating in the unseen. Matter always lags. Spirit always leads. Obeying the machine of the clock or the false absolutes of linear causation is a form of enslavement. True liberty for a divine being in flesh begins with alignment with the principle of causation. This is the only path to full sovereignty. This is the principle of causation. You become sovereign by ceasing to mistake effect for origin and living from the spiritual principles of rhythm, gender, correspondence, polarity, mentalism, and vibration. Govern belief. Invest energy with coherence. Align with the infinite mind where all things begin. From this throne, shape not only choices, but the very field from which choices emerge.
End of Chapter 7, Part 1 of Awaken Your Shadow by Seth Cherpak.